chess friends, how are you? I am Super Grandmaster Stockfish, and today I want to share an incredible chess opening which you can play in your games, and defeat your opponent like wind clears clouds effortlessly. We'll explore a powerful opening for white, the Vienna. I'll also share some winning strategies and traps in this opening. Before we begin, let's start with e4, followed by e5, which is a common move. Instead of the usual knight to f3, we'll opt for the less common knight to c3. This is known as the Vienna opening. Black typically responds with either this move or that move, which are the most common choices. Let's focus on knight f6 first. Here, we'll employ the Vienna Gambit by playing f4. Some may see this as a risky move, but it's perfectly acceptable. After most players capture the pawn, we follow up with the powerful move pawn to e5. Interestingly, the knight doesn't have any safe squares to move to now. After the knight retreats, we need to watch out for the queen h4 threat. Simply develop your knight, and you'll have a strong position. However, I want to share a neat trap with you. At this point, the best and most common move is d6, attacking the center and opening the diagonal for the bishop. We'll play d4, adding another defender. When black captures, we won't recapture immediately. Instead, we'll check with the bishop. It's quite typical for black to block with a pawn, and then we'll just retreat the bishop to c4. Black continues to capture pawns, putting us 3 pawns down. Additionally, our knight is under attack. However, we'll disregard this threat and develop our bishop instead. If black gets greedy and captures the knight, they're in trouble. Here's how. We begin with bishop f7 check, sacrificing the bishop. If black captures the bishop, they'll lose their queen, and if they don't take the bishop, can you figure out the winning move now? You're absolutely correct. Bishop g5 check can be blocked by the knight, so it's not the best move here. The winning move in this position is queen e2 check. If the king moves to e8, it's exposed and vulnerable. If it goes to d7 or blocks with the bishop, it leads to an immediate checkmate. So, capturing the bishop seems like the best option for black. However, after that, you have the brilliant move knight e5 check, which continues the attack and puts black in a difficult position. You've outlined the sequence perfectly. If the king moves to the e-file, knight c6 delivers a discovered check, winning the black queen. The only viable move then is king to f6. Now comes the stunning bishop g5 check. If the king moves away, the queen is lost. Even if the king takes the bishop, you have the beautiful family fork with this, winning the queen back. In a few moves following this sequence, checkmating the black king should be straightforward. In this scenario, after pawn captures and e5, if your opponent tries to be clever by playing queen e7 to prevent your pawn from moving, you can simply play queen e2 to unpin the pawn. Since the pawn is protected, your opponent can't capture it with the queen. Consequently, they are forced to move the queen back. After developing the knight to cover the queen h4 check, the next step is to address the cramped position of black's pieces, particularly the e-pawn. The common responses you'll often encounter to address this are d6 and knight c6. Let's examine them individually. If black plays d6, then you have the powerful move knight to d5, which creates immediate threats and puts significant pressure on black's position. You're absolutely right. After playing knight to d5, we're hitting the queen and also threatening a dangerous check. Queen e6 is clearly a losing move for black. Therefore, in most cases, black will play either queen d7 or d8. However, it doesn't matter much because we have a discovered check lined up regardless. Alternatively, a simpler approach is to attack immediately by capturing the e-pawn. This puts the rook in danger, prompting black to capture with the queen. Then, we unleash the discovered check, and once again, the queen is captured. Absolutely, this tactic is worth appreciating. If black plays knight c6 instead of d6, we respond with d4, which strengthens our center and targets the pawn. If black doesn't defend the pawn, we can capture it. If black moves the pawn to defend, we continue attacking with our knight, just like we discussed earlier, leading to a winning position for white. This line demonstrates the importance of controlling the center and exploiting weaknesses in the opponent's position. Sure. Let's explore what happens if black declines the gambit and defends with either d6 or knight c6. If black plays knight c6, the position is not favorable because after white captures pawn, and black recaptures, white can attack the knight, push it back, threaten another knight, push it back again, develop pieces, and prevent queen h4 check. Black might try to open the center, but white can continue to develop smoothly. Sure, focusing on piece activity and castling kingside is important. Utilizing the open f-file to target the opponent's king with all your forces can be effective. This will bring a great advantage for you. Going back to the position, let's talk about the knight c6 move. When black declines with d6, the strategy remains similar. Begin by developing the knight to attack the center. If black brings out the other knight, consider pinning it with your bishop, open up diagonals, eliminate the knight, and exert pressure on the center to maintain a strong position. Indeed, castling and attacking along the f-file can lead to a strong position for white in the long term. However, there is one move that can keep black in the game, which is declining the gambit with d5. This move is not intuitive, and most players who haven't studied it would not likely play it. In this main line, after capturing on d5, black can recapture with the knight since it is protected by the pawn. From here, you can move the knight to f3 to prevent the check. But an even better move would be queen to f3. This check is still protected, and your opponent will probably trade the knights. After this, focus on developing your bishops, perhaps castle on the queen side, and attack with your rooks along the open files. So even if black plays well, the game remains evenly matched. After the Vienna Gambit where black plays knight to f6, let's discuss what happens when black instead plays knight to c6. And let me share a quote with you. Talk about your blessings more than you talk about your problems. What would be your move in this position? Trying f4 in this position could lead to trouble because after black captures, there's an immediate threat with a queen check. Even if you defend with the knight, black can play g5, causing issues on the king side. So, f4 isn't ideal here, unlike in the previous variation. Instead, after knight c6, I recommend making a standard development move like bishop to c4. You might be curious why not develop the knight first. Well, in these scenarios, it's often beneficial to prepare moves like d3 or f4 to exchange pawns and utilize the f5 square effectively. It's wise to maintain flexibility for future moves. By developing the bishop, you keep options like d3 or f4 open. When black plays bishop to c5, an interesting move to consider is queen to g4, attacking black's pawn. Many opponents might defend with queen to f6, protecting the pawn and also threatening f2. Instead of trying to save the pawn, a stronger move is knight to d5. Even if black captures on there, it doesn't lead to a checkmate. Instead, black loses the queen in this situation. There's not much black can do to effectively counter this attack. Additionally, we have threats to capture both pawns and possibly both rooks as well. It's a challenging position for black to handle. Some players might try d6, but then you can capture on g7. You don't have to immediately capture the rook. Instead, you can attack the queen with your knight. If black takes the knight, you can follow up by attacking with your rook. Black can't simply move the queen away because it would be captured. You can continue with aggressive checks, and it's only a matter of time before delivering a decisive checkmate. Even if black doesn't capture the knight, they're still in a difficult position due to the multiple threats and attacks. If black doesn't capture the knight, and move the queen away, knight takes f7 can still arrive, which is just game over for you. Black is dead lost. And friends, if you are enjoying my content, then just thumbs up with the like button. Going back to this position, if black tries to avoid losing the queen by playing moves like g6 or even king to f8, you can still apply pressure by attacking the queen. Surprisingly, the queen has no safe squares to go to. If black moves the queen to d4, you can box it in, trapping the queen in the middle of the board. Eventually, you can play c3 to capture the trapped queen. The threat of knight to c7 remains, and you can also plan to move the queen and rook to attack the king via f7. Overall, this game is fantastic for playing as white. Now, in this situation, some players might consider moving the knight to f6 to attack the queen. However, in response, there's this amazing check move, and once again, black is finding it hard to keep control of the game. Now, let's rewind a bit. We started with bishop to c4, then bishop to c5, followed by queen to g4, and here we examined the most common reaction, which is moving the queen to f6. If black tries g6 instead, there's one important thing to watch out for. the move d5, which attacks both the queen and the bishop, so, it's crucial to move the queen to safety, keeping the pressure on the king's side. Then, you can follow up by developing the knight to prevent knight d4. Another interesting possibility is a sequence like d3, d6, which can lead to trapping the knight. And let me share a quote with you. Be patient, the best things happen unexpectedly. If black defends with the king, you can introduce another attacker, and essentially, the knight becomes vulnerable. So, that was the scenario where black mimics your moves with bishop c5. However, the more typical response is knight f6 because players are usually instructed to develop their knights before their bishops. Here again, playing f4 or any other haphazard move isn't optimal because black can cleverly capture the knight on e4. The crucial point is that after this capture, black can play d5 and actually gains an advantage. So, when exploring this variation, it's crucial to first secure this pawn to avoid the knight e4 tactic. Thus, playing d3 is a smart choice, bishop c5 is a common move, and now if desired, you can play f4, if black takes, you recapture, and if black defends, you can increase pressure in the center. In fact, there's an interesting trap here after knight g4. He may be considering poking our queen and rook, but we'll simply disregard that and counterattack similarly. If he proceeds, then we unleash the remarkable move queen h5, and it's game over for black. If black plays g6, we respond with this check, and then we'll launch an attack on the king from multiple angles. Our queen will play a significant role in this maneuver, and white is in a completely dominant position from this point onward. If black opts for a safer approach by castling instead of the immediate poke, we can disrupt the support of the knight. Even if black then attempts the same tactic, this move still works because it threatens from two directions. h6 is almost forced, opening up the king and allowing us to eliminate the rook, followed by pushing f6. This creates various mating possibilities. You can proceed in this manner, or if the queen captures, you can mate from the top. Or even involve the bishop to deliver the finishing blow. If black tries bishop g4 instead of knight g4, the key move to remember is knight to a4. The idea is to trade off these pieces, and if the knight jumps in, counter it with c3, let black make the exchange. Having these double pawns is acceptable because we'll castle on the queen side and utilize the open file for the rook. Once everything settles down, we'll have solid central control and a significantly improved position. Now, it's a puzzle time. It's black to move and win. Find the best sequences for black, and let me know your answer in the comment box. So wish you all the best, bye bye, see ya.